Rick is here.
Making noise.
Hey, Rick.
There you go. That's better.
Hi there.
Hello. Are we hybriding?
We are.
Want me to check with him? Rick? Want me to check with him?
I can check.
43 participants, 44 so far.
Looks like we're all set. Projector.
Want this on?
There is this.
Yeah, what?
What's that?
Here.
Well, let's give him a few minutes.
Okay, give him a few minutes.
I think we agreed last time when we're talking, we can take off our masks, right?
I think that might be a good idea. I certainly, no one can hear me with that on, without my mask, let alone with it.
And I fog up.
Oh, do you? I do too.
Are we good to go?
We are.
All right. I'll open the September 7th Planning Board meeting. It's 7:03. On the agenda tonight is the Senior Housing Special Permit continued for the Cherboco Capital Partners LLC. Should I read this whole thing?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay. Hearing on the application of Cherboco Capital Partners LLC in accordance with the following described applications for the development of the property located at 133 Essex Street, Hamilton, Mass., and shown on the Town Assessor's Map, parcel ID number 65-000-0001. Senior Housing Special Permit pursuant to 8.2 of the Town of Hamilton zoning bylaw to develop the property as 50-unit age-restricted condominium development, and 2, stormwater management permit pursuant to Chapter 29 of the Town of Hamilton bylaws dated April 2nd, 2016. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the application should appear at this time and place designated herein. We'll also discuss board business, upcoming schedule, articles that might be forthcoming at town meeting. So, with that said, I think we're ready to go.
Can I just input a little bit? We have worked with the applicant. Their focus is going to be on looking at zoning-related items, one of which will be GPOD and its applicability. Another will be regarding inclusionary housing. We'll also, I believe, see some cross-sections that we've requested heretofore. We'll be talking about some other senior housing, residential development-oriented requirements regarding developable acres. That would be regarding section 8.2.8 in the zoning bylaw. We're also going to be confirming or discussing the confirmation of the base senior housing density, and as that affects GPOD, and then discussing eligibility in terms of locations in town, limitations on maximum units in town, 55 year-old plus, as well as having limitations on anyone under 18, and then permitted uses. There was one main topic that I did want to help the board out with first. I did some,
Patrick, I'm sorry, people seem to be commenting that there's electronic feedback and whatnot, and they can't hear.
maybe if we ask,
I've been asking
our
these
folks,
guys to see
okay.
if they can, sorry, but I don't think anyone can hear. Some kind of electronic buzzing noise they're getting. Maybe we can take our phones away from the.
I wonder if you need to minimize the speaker on the laptop.
Pat's speaker is off. Patrick's speaker is off.
yeah, it's off.
Oh, okay.
And no one else is, you're not dialed in, are you?
No, I got
Yeah.
the bylaw.
You get your notes.
Mind if I open the window?
Oh, no, I took my jacket off.
All right. As I was mentioning, I have done some, prepared some notes for board members, particularly those that haven't had the experience regarding the GPOD zoning yet. So let me provide that to the group. The Hamilton zoning bylaw has within section 9.1 a bylaw regarding groundwater protection. This was created and adapted from a model zoning bylaw that was obtained from the state a number of years ago. It's been revised a few times relative to the text of it. The last text change was in May of 2000. And then a map change occurred in 2015 that took a small portion of land area that was the area that accommodated what was known as the Patton Well. That was off of Asbury Street. The purpose of the GPOD is self-evident. It's to protect groundwater both in quality and quantity. We have a map that covers two sections of the town. One is, as I was referring to, in the western part of town toward the Patton Ridge area. Another area is in the southeast tip of Hamilton, which gets really close to Essex and Manchester on that side of town. The best maps that I'm aware of that depict the GIS or that depict the GPOD are the town's GIS systems, which are part of the assessor's GIS database. The ZB, or the zoning bylaw, requires that 1/3 of a site be in the GPOD. Then the entire site has to be applicable to the GPOD requirements in the bylaw. The subject site at 133 Essex Street is partially within the GPOD mapping. I am not sure what that percentage is, and I think we should probably find out from the applicant. I'm sure that they have evaluated geometrically how much of that site happens to be in the GPOD district for that
So,
percentage.
Patrick, you might want to hold off because their messaging is that they can't hear you.
Okay. Okay, we'll continue to try to solve the sound issue.
Would it be worth trying another mic?
Is this any better, folks?
Not a microphone issue.
Can't hear anything, is what they're saying.
Bill said he was gonna try one. That's all right. Apparently Bill is gonna log in. He's not on,
Okay.
but.
So what are we
outside of
doing?
Restarting it, I'm not sure what. These guys have tried a couple things in there. You're muted and your volume's all the way down.
Yeah, it's muted and, yeah, I pressed the mute on the computer itself as well.
Have you rebooted the computer?
This computer's not hosting the meeting. Their computer's hosting the meeting.
That's correct.
So it's not this computer.
No, it's not.
Have they rebooted their computer?
I don't know. but
This is the. Yeah, this is the invite here. Since it's something to do with their recording.
Calm down.
Oh, no, I've got the electronic genius gonna go over and fix it, right?
Pardon?
The electronic genius is gonna go over and fix it?
No, I want to just read messages.
Oh, okay.
They're too small, I can't read them from over there.
Start banging on things. That's an old TV.
Would you get feedback if the mics are too close to each other?
They can't hear anything.
Okay.
Problem is definitely their room, because this mic feeds the speakers, and so it's not the mic, because the speakers aren't freaking out. This computer's not hosting it, it's just our connection to the room. It's gotta be HWPN.
Bill now.
Now they're saying they hear us.
You can tell Bill that we made him co-host, and I don't know if that's gonna be.
Yeah, some people are saying they do hear us.
Say again?
Whether we just went to all Zoom.
You can hear Bill and all that.
I don't know.
Who's building up on?
Because we didn't seem to have the problem when we were on Zoom.
We can hear Bill, but we can't hear him.
You guys aren't Bill Melville.
Excuse me,
We got in 3 phone calls, there's no audio going out? Okay,
We're watching it up there.
okay, they keep calling the PD for the audio issue. So,
Can you help us fix it?
I have no idea. But just so if you guys could hopefully address that.
Still trying to figure it out. So both these can, where,
Bill's computer's not a problem. A lot of emails when you get done with this.
yeah,
Oh,
you had a
man.
busy day.
Yeah.
All right.
Select all, Nick, red, Mark as red.
All right, so we just ended the Zoom. You said restart it. We ended it. We left. So now we're the host. So should we be making Bill the co-host or? Still, I heard the robot. Just muted this thing. Did that work at all?
This is, Bill Melville.
Hey, Bill. So we just stopped and restarted. Do you want us to make you the co-host? It's not sending the audio. Yep. Well, let me find you. Okay. All right. All right, Matt. You're saying it's something to do with the noise canceling feature in this? Maybe? I have no idea. This is
Yeah, it must be his.
Bill now. Bill said he was gonna dial back in and try to make him. It's the select meeting has sabotaged ours.
Are you still looking for Bill Melville?
He's got these guys troubleshooting something.
Okay.
It's hard for him to
Yeah,
do it remotely, I'm sure, you know?
I'm sure.
He hasn't dialed back in yet.
Would it be useful to respond to the chat so that folks know what's happening?
Patience. Okay, did I spell everything right?
You did it right.
Engineers can't spell.
Recording in progress.
We don't have the room on anymore.
Patrick, have other groups or meetings had trouble with getting on Zoom?
Some, yes.
The other thing is, I thought we were eliminating their ability to be chatting among each other.
No, I think, so there's chats, and then there's even, like, you can raise your hand is separate, so they can chat all day long, you don't have to acknowledge it, so to speak. You can have someone just kind of reading them, but they can't, like, unmute themselves and just start talking. And then we're showing Paul's.
Oh, okay, got it.
Anybody got any cards and we have a poker game?
I bet it's because this meeting is running simultaneously.
Yep.
These guys are just unplugging things and plugging it back in again. What happens?
It's like the Forrest Gump movie.
I guess when we comment, they don't see that it's coming from. Seems like some people have missed our troubleshooting the issue message.
So you can probably talk to Billy about doing it. Okay.
Because it's only going to the hosts and panelists. Switch it to everyone, so when you comment, it's not just to a single person. Click on the Corey Farinell name right there at the bottom. Go, yep, up to the top. With everyone. There. Now when you type everyone, you'll see it.
Yeah, they're all wondering whether we're talking without them hearing.
Well, as he's been typing messages, it's only gone to Bill.
Ah,
It hasn't gone to everyone.
yeah. So I think it's worth saying that nobody's carrying on the meeting, and we're still troubleshooting, and there's no deliberations.
Oh, we
No
made a
presentation,
decision.
no deliberations.
Made a decision already.
What's that?
We've already voted, made it.
You can post that in the chat.
It's a feedback issue with their noise cancellation. Shouldn't we just turn off the speakers in here? Just feed the Zoom and we just talk loud enough to hear each other?
That makes sense.
Worth a try.
What did he say? I couldn't hear him.
Turn off the mics.
Oh, Well, leave the mics on, but turn off the speakers.
Turn off the speakers, right?
That's a good idea.
And then we just
Except,
talk
yeah.
loudly to
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah, because we don't need the
There's no
speaker.
background noise to interfere, so.
There is, I think, a select board meeting now, yeah. It's only a Zoom meeting.
that again.
Right in one table.
Yeah.
You wanted that off, right, Patrick?
Yeah, I think we should probably leave it on, right?
Yeah, on.
Yeah, I think maybe leave it on.
Are you still thinking it's a noise cancellation thing?
It's hard to say, those guys are kinda in there.
We just turn off these speakers?
So they got them on a. They got them on like this little control box in there, which seems to be,
Do you want the projector back on or off?
I think on is good, just in case they get this thing sorted.
My point is simply that we don't need the audio in the room, the Zoom needs the audio. So
Zoom
the
needs the
connection,
audio.
the issues between the speaker and the mic, then turn off the speakers in here.
But we would need to hear the people talking.
And this is the planning board, right?
Yep.
That's correct, yeah.
Says here the 14th for you people, on the calendar.
It's been, no, that might be the beginning of the year calendar. We made some changes in July.
That's possible. Yeah, okay.
That's a good point. It's actually 30 minutes in now.
Donna could probably tell you how to get on Zoom.
Could you go get her?
Recording
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
progress.
Wasn't she?
Yeah, she's on it all the time. With different groups of people.
We should just get everybody in the room. Screw it. The breakthrough rate is less than 0.5%. It's like,
Oh, no, I think you're wrong on that.
There
no.
was 86 people in there. You want to see 86 people in front of you?
Make them wear masks.
Any hope?
Doesn't seem so.
No, it doesn't, does it? Bill, dial back in and give it a shot.
Bill,
We may want to think in terms of a contingency plan.
As in rescheduling,
Is it BF?
as in wait until our next meeting.
BF or which one is he?
Because we have to repost for 2 weeks, right, or 1 week?
Oh, yeah.
We just had to vote to continue.
Which one is he? I don't know which one Bill is.
well, you could send out a reverse 911 and tell the town that canceled it or something.
I don't think everybody in town needs to know that.
Well, I know anybody's trying to see you now.
Well, we can send them a message.
I don't see him on the list of attendees.
I just texted him, he can't find you, and then he's.
Okay, that's a William, that's why.
William Melville. Yeah, that'd be him.
Sir.
Thank you, sir.
What did you do?
William the panelist.
Recording in progress.
All right, see if that works. You still get the robot audio?
Yeah, I turned it on.
It's on. It's on?
Yeah.
Is the audio still having feedback?
Let me just run.
They can hear you loud and clear. That's what they're saying. It's working.
Okay.
Okay, everybody back to, shall we start again?
Good try, yeah. I don't know why the audio is not, the visual is not coming up in the.
Jump based on speaker. Based on.
You guys have the video on?
Yep, it's all set.
Because it looks like we're looking at the clock still.
I have no idea.
Might be interesting to find out.
There we go. Okay.
Okay,
I think we
we're
have
back.
audio and I think we have visual. So let's,
Thumbs up emoji.
say again?
So you got your thumbs up emoji over there.
Okay, good. I apologize for the delays. We've solved the audio problem. There hasn't been any discussion by the board of anything since the beginning. Patrick was beginning to do an introduction of the topics that we were going to discuss tonight. And Patrick, now that you've rehearsed, let's do it again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We mentioned that the items that are to be discussed tonight are a review of the GPOD and its applicability, that's groundwater protection overlay district. We'll also discuss inclusionary housing and its implication on the project. We have asked for some cross-sections of the development area as it relates to abutting properties that we're expecting to see. There are other senior housing zoning bylaw elements also that the development project attorney will discuss with us regarding density, developable acres, eligible locations for a senior housing project, limitations, as well as permitted uses. So with that, why don't I turn it over to the applicant's attorney, Jill Mann.
There she is.
Just to confirm, I'm able to be heard?
Okay, hold on, Jill. We need to get the volume on in the speakers here turned up.
She should talk again.
Do you
Jill?
need me to speak again?
Yeah. just-
Not yet.
You can't barely hear the folks in there. There you go. All right, should be all set.
Try again, Jill.
Hi. Anything?
Better?
Yeah, we need a little louder if we can get it, but go ahead.
Okay. I actually have a PowerPoint presentation. I thought because of the hybrid nature of the hearing that it might be a good idea to send around a PowerPoint, because I know that it can be somewhat difficult for the board to see that which the public is also seeing. So I did, Mr. Ruffett, I did send to you via email, and I did try and send it out to the planning board, just the presentation that is going to be shown this evening, which is the CHCP PowerPoint, 9.7 2021. And if you would allow me, I can share my screen.
Go ahead. Oh
Okay.
dear.
Let's see how I share my screen here. There we go. It says host is disabled. Now I'm trying to share. Can you see my screen yet?
No.
Okay,
No.
that's a little odd. Host is disabled, participant screen sharing. You actually have to enable it.
I think you could try again.
There we go. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I am assuming that everybody can see my screen. Is that correct?
Not yet. We,
Okay. I can hear it loading, so perhaps that's. I see myself multiple times. I don't know. Boy, this is frustrating tonight, huh?
hold on, Joe, we're working on it.
Sure, no worries.
You should have the stop participant sharing, so she should be able to share.
It says I'm screen sharing. I just don't see anything up there.
Right, we get the same thing.
I guess try to stop sharing and reshare.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm trying to.
I think we're looking at your screen.
Yeah,
now.
we've
You have it
got it.
now?
We've got it.
Woohoo! Okay, great. That's wonderful news. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so again, introduce myself, Jill Mann, here on behalf of the petitioner, Cherboco Hill Capital Partners, the applicant in connection with the special permit for senior housing. I provided for the general public as well as the panelists a PowerPoint just to facilitate the process this evening. I thought it might be a little bit easier for us to go through all of the items. So just meet the development team. I know we all know who most people are, just thought it would be good to update. So the applicant is Cherboco Capital Partners, as I had said. Larry Smith and Julia Dickinson are on the line and will be participating. The civil engineers, Granite Engineering, Brenton Cole is the professional engineer responsible for designing the plans. The surveyor and wetland scientists are from Williams and Spragus. Greg Hoffmuth is the wetland scientist who is overseeing that portion of the property relative to the wetland and the notice of intent filed with the Conservation Commission. And some of the members of the board met him during our site walk, as well as Brent's partner, Jeff Merritt. The landscape architects is William Fleming. The general architects are LF Architects. I am obviously the attorney, the proponent, and then the owner's Country Squire Realty, which is Catherine Rich and Brian Rich. So just to give a quick overview, because I always think that's very helpful for everyone. So general overview, property is 68-acre parcel. Everybody knows where it is, Essex and Cherboco. It's zoned R1B. There are 24 acres of which are in the ground water overlay protection district. Our proposal is very clear. We're seeking to develop a 50-unit senior housing development on 16.2 acres of land that are located within the property. Out of those 50 dwelling units, we're going to have 12 single-family homes, and then there'll be 19 two-family homes. We're going to have a looped roadway and a cul-de-sac. And we will be providing over those roadways all utilities. There's a stormwater management system that is going to comply with all storm management regulations locally and at the state level, and a single septic system, again, that will comply with Title V as well as the local Board of Health regulations. And that permit has been submitted. So presently we've submitted all the required permits: Board of Health, stormwater, site plan, special permit, 2 of them. What else we're proposing to do is we're proposing to preserve the farmland. So there's that large open farmland that they have begun to actually till and I believe planted in the last 3 weeks since our last meeting. The amount of farmland is about 9.4 acres, but only about 6.4, 6.5 of it is actively farmed because some of it's located in the wetland. It just so happens that when the prior owner leased the land to the prior farmer, it just included more area than was actually farmed. We are going to preserve open space. I mean, I like to say we're saving the Cherboco Woods trails. There's only one trail actually based on our site walk that will not be preserved, and it's the yellow trail that is really a very difficult trail to traverse. I think a lot of the members can actually testify to that because we did have to try and go up and down them during the site walk. Basically, at the end of the day, in addition to the 10 acres approximately of farmland, we will be preserving 40 acres of open space. And that 40 acres of open space will be undisturbed. It'll have some disturbance that will be minor in the beginning and then will be left undisturbed. And that's really the access road that will go out to the septic system. And then the septic system soil absorption portion, which will be allowed to revegetate and operate as an open meadow. The requested relief, everybody knows what we need. 2 special permits, one for senior housing, one for major residential subdivision, and then another for site plan approval. I'm sorry, it's just 2 special permits. I don't know why I said major residential. We don't. I put major project down, but we don't. Stormwater management permit as well. So now we go to Village at Cherboco Hill, eligibility and compliance. This is what Mr. Reffert was talking about. We're going to go through all of the elements of the GPOD, the affordability, but I thought it was essential that we just get on a table, do we comply with all of the eligibility requirements under 8.2? And the answer is yes. So under 8.2, the districts that are available for senior housing is an R1B zoning district. And in fact, all of the residential districts are R1B, R1A, RA. And by the way, eligibility is not impacted by the fact that there is GPOD. It is not impacted. Canterbrook is completely within the GPOD and was completely developed. They simply had to comply with some of the dimensional aspects of the RA district, which just means more land mass. Just background. You know, some of the eligibility requirements are that you have to make sure that your particular development is going to be subject to certain constraints. And those constraints are 55 and older, prohibits children, I shouldn't say children, prohibits individuals under the 18 from permanently residing. It's supposed to be a senior development. And then there's a restriction on the town-wide number of units that can be had, as well as there needs to be a circumference. And we went through that before. We're more than a mile away from any other project, which is Patton Ridge and Canterbrook. And the number of units in Patton Ridge and Canterbrook equate to 35 units. So there isn't 100 yet. And our project at 50 will not go over 100, which means, again, this is eligible to be developed up to 50. Your zoning specifically says you can't have senior housing with more than 50, which is why we are not seeking any density bonus, despite being eligible for all of the density bonuses to be able to increase our numbers. But we aren't able to do that because we already hit the 50 number based on the area of land that we have. The development consists of single-family, two-family structures, open space, and farmland. All of that are permitted by right uses in that senior housing bylaw. The development contains also a limitation that units can have no more than 2 bedrooms, and we meet that too, and we demonstrate that through the architectural plans that have been submitted. So the next slide is basically, let's talk about density. So I know there's been a lot of back and forth about what density means. Do you meet it? Do you not meet it? We meet it in every instance. So we're just going to go through it. I'm going to reference some GPOD stuff, and then we'll go back. So how do you determine density for senior housing development? You basically take the number of acres of land you have, and you subtract out wetland. That's how it works. So we have 66 acres of land that are available. We have 16.2 that are wetland. So in the bulk, if we are going to just look at the entire property itself, that leaves us 50 developable acres. That means under either scenario, if I'm not going to get into it, but basically we have 50 available developable acres, which yields us the ability to develop 50 units in any and all circumstances. And I'm going to talk about it again when we talk about the GPOD, which is why you see on this slide. If we exclude the farmland, and the reasons for excluding the farmland would be because the GPOD in its structure, in its format, is odd. It requires that 33% of your property is GPOD, then you have to meet all requirements. It wasn't intended to be applicable to a huge tract of land. It makes no sense, and the application is absurd. It was intended so that if someone has a single family home and they're trying to put in a septic system, a home, a pool, a driveway, a yard, that if they're in the GPOD, you can't do it on a 20,000 square foot lot if more than 30% of your property is in the GPOD. It all makes sense, that applicability. Because if you can subdivide your land and still retain a zoning compliant property and not have 33% of your land be subject to GPOD, i.e. the 33%, then you would. And that means you have enough land to take into account any burden that a home would put on water resources protection and open space. So that's why I have on this particular slide, if we exclude the farmland, the property legitimately has 44 developable acres of land. And if we excluded the farmland, by the way, we have no issue with GPOD, which means we're subject to the rules and density ability of an R1B district. R1B allows 2 units per developable acre, which means 88. Even if we did that, it's my opinion there would actually be 100 because GPOD doesn't really apply in this instance. But even if it did, it would still be 88 units. Now, if we include the farmland and we apply the RA district as was stated in a memo from Donna Brewer, the town council from back in 2010, 2012, 2014, we would simply apply the RA dimensional requirements. Okay, so that means if we include the farmland though, and we have 50 developable acres, that means GPOD would have more than 33%. We still only trigger RA, which means 1 unit per developable acre, 50 to 50. Again, we still meet and comply with all of the requirements to develop this property as a 50-unit development. So that's what base density is. So base density for senior developments is intended because you give up a great deal. You either have to develop affordable homes or you have to contribute money. So the reason for allowing a multiplier for base density is to allow an individual property owner the right to build up some money to be able to offset those additional costs. In this case, we're not even entitled to do that. We can't go above our base density, but that's the reason why you have those multipliers, because it costs more to provide those other attributes, it costs more to keep the farmland, it costs more to add open space. So our base density number of 50 units is basically just going to be that. We are going to be limited to 50 units because under section 8.2.16, you can only have 50 units in one project, and that's what our limit is. And again, I just put all of this information on the slide so it would be easy, and when we're done and people have questions, it's simple to go through the outline. So I already answered a lot of questions about GPOD. If you remember, Ms. Crouch had raised some issues relative to GPOD. I know Attorney Eliason did as well. And I just wanted to be able to put it out and get it on the table. So I did prepare a memo that was distributed to the board and is part of the public record. In my opinion, and quite frankly, based on the text of the bylaw, the GPOD neither governs, applies, affects, nor limits the development as proposed. You know, basically what you have to do is you have to look at all of the provisions of the bylaw. So you look at section 9.1.5, which is that section that says, hey, if GPOD affects 33% of lot, then the whole lot has to comply with GPOD requirements. But you have to look at the definition of lot. It doesn't mean always what you think it does. So some people are thinking it means the whole property. It doesn't say property, it says lot. So when you read what lot means under section 11, it clearly states, under section 11, a lot is an area.
Excuse me, Jill, may I interrupt for a minute?
Certainly you may.
Mr. Chair, can you turn off the comments from the audience? Some of these comments aren't really relevant to the discussion, I don't think, at this point.
They're more distracting than they are whether it's a case
That's
of
right.
relevant or not.
Oh, I turn mine off too. You can go to chat and you can literally hit the X and then you won't see them until it's time to have public comment too.
Are we off?
I think so.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. So basically, a lot is any area of land in one ownership with definite boundaries used or available for use as a site for one or more buildings. It's clear the development area is a lot pursuant to this particular definition, and there is no GBOD in the development area, not a stitch of it. You know, the development, the farmland, the open space, they all constitute 3 separate identifiable lots of land. And again, as I had said before, even assuming that people were going to try and argue that the GPOD would affect because it's 33% and it applies to property, which it does not. It's clear. The rules are clear. The definition is clear. But even if they were to attempt to do that, the farmland would immediately be severed from the ownership because, quite frankly, there's a very long-term lease for it and there's no applicability or no benefit to holding it in one ownership. It'd be subdivided. And then the result would be that the property would have 57 acres of land, 14 and a half acres would be within the GPOD, which is only 25%, boom, 9.1.5 has absolutely no applicability whatsoever. So it's pretty clear when you look at the actual effect and that particular provision that the intent was not to do something like that. Because if you look across the street, there are properties that are closer to the GPOD that wouldn't be affected by that provision, despite the fact that this property would be. The result is arbitrary, capricious, and makes no sense in terms of applying it to a property that absolutely does not affect the GPOD. Again, that's how I get, oops, I didn't mean to fly that fast. That's how I get the 50 unit and why it is my opinion, based on a careful reading of your zoning bylaw, that the GPOD is inapplicable. I offer these slides simply because it demonstrates the separability, the identifiability of each of the individual parcels. So here's the farmland at 9.4 acres. This is actually the attachment to the lease. You can see how it's clearly definable. Here is the open space with the 50 acres of land, which includes the farmland at this point. The open space is still going to be preserved. And in this instance, I simply wanted to show the entire area. And you can see where the development area is. And I'm going to annotate for you, because I think it's best to do so, where the GPOD is. So if I may, you're going to see it in blue. This is the GPOD. And one moment, I'm going to show you over here. So that's this area, if you will. I'm just doing this so it's more clear. This is the GPOD. As you can see, not only is the development area outside the GPOD, but also the soil absorption system, which is right here, is also located outside of the GPOD. It does not have to be. You can locate a septic system within. I simply say that the actively used portions of the property that are for the development are completely outside of the GPOD. There is one area right here that is a passive storm water system. So there is a drainage basin right in this area, and I'm going to actually erase some lines so that you can see it more clearly. So this area right here is where there's a stormwater basin. The stormwater basin is probably less than half an acre, including the graveled small access path. There's been a lot of statements about there being, you know, a large utility path. It's not a large utility path. It's simply, you know, a graveled path. It probably will be used to hike portions of the property once the development is complete. And then we'll actually continue on and make for more trails out of the back of the area. There is absolutely no permanent trail, by the way, going to the septic system. There will be, just for the purposes of this board tonight, there will be a temporary access path created so that vehicles can come over from the development portion and to extend and provide access to, oops, I can't get my annotation back, provide access to the septic system, but that's part of the request for the order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. That particular path will in fact be basically re-scarified. So once the work's done, the pads and the protected measures that were put on will be removed and the area re-scarified, which just means kind of raked so that the natural vegetation can regrow. Just as a point of interest, next to the septic system, if the board will remember during the site walk, there is an open meadow. Because we're going to be creating an open meadow where the septic system is, and there are current trees, we're going to vegetate the open meadow and substitute that existing open meadow right now where the septic system is, because septic systems need to be mowed at least once per year so that you don't get large woody growth. Now I'm just going to erase. If I don't erase the line, it'll just show on my my next slide. So here we go. All right. Okay. Mr. Mitchell, just do you want me to stop at any point, or would you prefer me to go through everything and then come back to you?
Let me poll the members and see how what their feeling is on that. Any questions, Jonathan, Emil?
No, she can continue.
Marnie?
I think she can go ahead and finish.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to make sure. Okay, so Village at Cherboco Hill inclusionary zoning. So that was another issue, right? Remember how we had the discussion? Inclusionary zoning, can you put affordable units on, can't you? What can you do? I'm pretty confident that the board understands that there is absolutely no ability to be able to count any units that would be putting this towards your, you know, your housing inventory. It just doesn't work because it's 55 and older. That's DCHD's policy. So in order to provide affordable units, the requirement is to contribute money. Providing off-site units in a place like Hamilton where you really don't have any sort of, you know, multifamily other than in one very small section near Willow, you know, there's very limited off-site options, if any, to provide this number. So we are requesting the ability to provide a contribution. And by the way, we do have a meeting tomorrow with the Affordable Housing Authority, which we're looking forward to having. We did get a memo from them, but I believe that there were some maybe, I don't want to say misunderstandings, but maybe some difficulty in applying the formula. And I'm just going to go through it. Number one, because I've been through it many, many times, and I've been through it with this board and other projects in this town as well. So the method for providing affordable units. I just wanted to set out the statute, I shouldn't say statute, the bylaw section. So affordable units have to be constructed either on a different locus or on the property, or a donation of land, and that would be the equivalent fee in lieu of units is going to be a certain value, right? So we recently, or the board recently updated its bylaw. Previously, we had to rely on the minutes from the past annual town meetings, but it now is updated to read an equivalent fee in lieu of units for each required unit shall be 3 times the area median income. The reason I say it like that is you're going to see why, because it's a very confusing term, and DHCD I mean, HUD does a marginal job explaining, and the bylaw really doesn't vet it well, because I don't know that if in the drafting of this particular language, all of the possibilities were thought about of misconstruction and misconstruing some terminology. So I stress that. And it says 3 times the AMI, right, determined by HUD income limits. That's the key. It's AMI and income limits. And that's where you're going to see why the memo provided to you by the Affordable Housing Trust is off by quite a sum of money. I'm just going to jump to the chase. The Affordable Housing Trust proposal said that this development would be required to provide $2.5 million in an offsetting contribution. For 6 units of housing, I think we can all agree that's like insanely high. I've never seen that number that high, and it's because instead of using the AMI, what was used was the median family income, MFI. And I'll go back and explain, but I just want to get it out there. That was the number. And by the way, they use 7 units instead of 6 for some reason as well. Our proposal is to provide a contribution, which is quite substantial in the amount of $1,409,000. And we base that on the AMI with income limits. And the reason you say with income limits is because in order to have the SHI be qualified, you must limit the cost of the unit to 80%, so that somebody with an 80% of the median family income or median person income, you'll see in a bit what I mean, can afford the unit. So first, mandatory provision. In any development, the 10th, I'm going to go through how we get the 6. So what you say is, look, if you're going to be developing a project, and this is interesting throughout your town, if I have a subdivision, a traditional one, and I have 10 homes, I have to provide an additional affordable unit. I have to provide an affordable unit when I hit the 10th. And then every 7th unit thereafter, or lot thereafter, I have to give you another equivalent or affordable housing unit. And so it's every 7th unit. So if we go through it, and I'm looking down here in the proposal, you would actually, I apologize, right here, you actually go through it and you say this 10th unit, then each 7th. So it's the 10th, the 17th, the 24th, the 31st, the 38th, and the 45th units all trigger one affordable housing unit. That equals 6. The bylaw does not require that you gross up because the next unit, it's however many units you hit. Once you hit the 7th, it triggers, not before. So it's 6 units, it's clear. The bylaw is very clear about how you determine it. It was done in Canterbrook, and I'm certain that it was done in Patton as well. And it's every 7th after the 10th. So in any event, it is 6 AHIs. So now the method for providing affordable is going to be, how do you determine this payment? And it is not a great formula, right? So you read it and you get a little confused, equivalent fee. The purpose of this going in, and originally I remember I read through all of your town meeting minutes and you said, oh, let's just do 2 times. And then it was decided, it was with Mr. Stein, I think it was Mr. Mitchell and a couple of other people from the planning board at the time said, you know what, we want 3 times the AMI. And the reason we want 3 times the AMI is because we feel that we need to be able to build the unit, and we feel that that's going to be a better multiple. So that's what you determined, and that's what it is. And when we had done Canterbrook, we were at a lesser multiple, I believe, than that, or maybe very close. But notwithstanding, your current requirement is 3 times the multiple, and that is what we provided. So when you actually look at the formula, you have to look at AMI, which is area median income. And then you do it with income limits. So you look at HUD's AMI income limits. You don't look at the median family income. And I'm going to show you the chart in just a second. So basically also what we had done, which is something we're going to discuss because this isn't part of your bylaw. We just think it's fair, but it's not part of your bylaw. You look at what the number of household people are. It's a senior development. You expect 2 household members. So you expect 2 contributing income or wage earners of some sort, which is why you look under it for a 2-person household. However, our experience with senior housing is that there are about 25% of those units are actually single people. They'll come in, they'll be either, the result of a passing or, divorce or some other issue, and or just a single person wants to buy at the age of 55. So we do have about 25% of our units in Canterbrook and other of our properties that we own throughout the North Shore that Mr. Smith is the principal of. It's about 25%, which is why I adjusted the AMI figure to include one person and two-person households. Again, what the Affordable Housing Trust used for its formula not only was 7, but it used the median family income for a household of 4 instead of the AMI for households of 2. So I'm going to show you on the next sheet what that is. Oops, I'm just flipping through crazy. Okay, here it is. This is just to explain to you. So when you look at the inclusionary zoning, the definition of low income is an 80% AMI, and that's just what this says. I don't know if you can read it, but it says HUD Section 8 program definition of low income is the 80%. So that's what your bylaw says. It's a low income. So now we look at what are the income limits. This is HUD's table, AMI income limits. So I'm going to make this larger because I think that it would be better if I make it a little bit larger.
Yeah.
So make it 175. Okay, is that better? Everybody can see that much better? So essentially, Hamilton is in the Brockton, Cambridge, Quincy median income area. So the limit, the number that was actually used by the Affordable Housing Trust was this number. I think it's because the way in which the column is prefaced, it is a bit confusing. So area median income actually refers to this, area median income for all of these persons, right? That's what it refers to. This column is this. It actually is referring to the 100% 4-person MFI. Again, I recognize that it's not the easiest table to read. It's just that that's what it applies to. So you don't use the 100, 120, 800. That's actually what your 4-person median family income is. What you do look at is, again, what the we're asking that you look at the 1 and 2-person columns, and the 2-person columns is 80,000, and the 1-person column is 70,000. That's AMI, and that's AMI income limits. So again, I offer this to you, and we can have a conversation later, but I think that it was important to kind of run through what it really meant, because again, these tables are put out and there's definitional explanations throughout HUD's online presence. It's just you have to go through everything, and it can be, I understand it can be difficult for volunteers to try and find all of these definitions and try to figure out which ones match. So I wanted to make sure I provided that.
Jill, can we stop for a minute?
Most certainly.
I certainly have a question. Can you go back to where you divide, you have 80% of the unit, yeah, there you go. I think it's the bottom of this slide. 80% of the units are designated as, or 75% of the units are designated as 2-person, and then 25% of the units are 1-person. I don't remember if you did this at Canterbrook or not. Do you have a recollection?
I do. We did not do this. We didn't have the historical performance in Hamilton. We do now, but in general, our other projects as well, we actually analyzed the historical performance, and that was what we got. And I can submit detailed information for you, but I did not use it for Canterbrook, no.
Yeah, and I don't think it was used for Patton Ridge either. So my concern there is that while you may have historical experience, I don't know, and I don't know where the historical experience is coming from, but the application of the bylaw was 80% of AMI for all the units, not
Yes.
just 25% of, not 75% of them.
Yep.
So I'm questioning that division, since they're two-bedroom units, more than, they're designed for at least a couple. There may be individual that will buy in, but I think for the intent of the bylaw, it's assumed that they're going to be two-person households.
And I agree. I do agree. I mean, we thought we should bring it forward to the board and explain why we do it like this. And again, it was meant to open discussions, but we recognize and understand your position.
Yep. And I understand the 100% is the area median income, so I have no issue with that. So I was just concerned about the division of 75-25.
Yeah, and we
Well,
would.
I
our-
actually have a significant issue with your use of 80% of AMI, because the intent of this inclusionary bylaw is to generate money so units can be placed on the SHI. And
Exactly.
the families that are excluded from this development are just that, they're families. They may have 4 people in them. So I think your creative approach here is really unrelated to what affordable housing is all about. It's not senior housing, and there, in my mind, no basis in reading this bylaw to use 80% of AMI. And then furthermore, when you read the bylaw and the definitions, it does refer to the midpoint, well, AMI is defined as the midpoint household gross income for a specific geographic area. That's household income, and it's more related to NFI than your approach. So I think that this bylaw, in my mind, is not particularly ambiguous, but what you have done is made it ambiguous. So
And
I think that there's significant room for discussion on this, but I am simply utterly unconvinced that there's any basis to use 80% as opposed to 100%.
And again, the reason for it is the bylaw language itself. I mean, it couldn't be more clear that it's AMI and the number used is MFI. It's not the same. So if you even look at the table,
actually,
I mean,
you know-
if you look at the table, if you even look at the 4-person low income AMI, it's still not 120. It's apples and oranges, AMI and MFI. The MFI is used to be able to create the income limits in your own bylaw. Specifically states that it states it. I mean, it says the area median income as determined by HUD income limits.
Well,
And
there
that's
is
what
an
we
income
used
limit.
when we
I mean, the
did.
income limit is, where you would not qualify would be $120,800. That's the income limit.
No, the income limit is not. The income,
No,
that's
you're-
the AMI. If you read
You're
the
not
table.
right on that, Marnie.
I mean, we are gonna go before the Affordable Housing Trust tomorrow, and we can discuss it more, but no, most certainly not. The income limits are those items shown in blue on the screen in front of you. The AMI is what this table limits. The MFI is what's used to derive all of the other numbers. If you go through all of the details with HUD, it's very clear that what the tables are intended to provide are the median income levels for each person. And it's 2-person household. By trying to impose a 4-person household on a senior development, you're basically ensuring that they will never be developed because they cannot be. When you use a single family home, that's a different animal. And that's when you would use the 4-person for single-family homes. And that's what your own bylaw says.
Yeah, and I think, Marty, you need to look at the precedent that was set,
Well,
both with.
there is no precedent at Cherboco.
Excuse me. At Patton Ridge and, God, I'm drawing a blank, Cranbrook. Area median income is the base from which they use to discount at 80, 60, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is. It was never, area median income is a full income for a family of 4. That's not meant as that's the base from which you start. That's not what you end up as for affordable housing. So while I applaud the ideas to maximize the revenue from this project to the Affordable Housing Trust, I think we have to be cognizant of what the guidelines actually say and actually how they've been applied in 2 previous over age 55 housing projects.
Well, did you use the 80% figure at Cannabrook?
Yeah.
And you applied that, she just said you didn't apply it to 1 and 2 bedroom units.
No.
The question, let me explain, Joe. What I said is, and I understand what the applicant is doing here is trying to use historical experience and saying, well, 25% of the units will be occupied by a single person. That was never a differentiation that was intended by the bylaw, since I was involved in authoring that bylaw, nor has it been applied that way at Patton Ridge or at Cannabrook. So that's where I have a question is, I think all of the units should be assumed to be 2-bedroom and eliminate the 2 units that are being essentially discounted. Any questions, Jonathan? Emil?
No.
I mean, Marty, I think you'll have that discussion tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think we will, because, frankly,
No, I get it.
I'm not seeing it.
No, I understand. Okay, well, you want to continue?
Most certainly, thank you very much. So I wanted to also go back. I'm going to go back to unzooming and just go to fit. Well, I can't do this. I want to go back and then just talk a little bit about our site walk and and just a follow-up analysis. So when we were out at the site walk, I think it was a great experience. I think it was very important for everybody to understand, our approach to the development. I think it was very important, thanks to Mr. Poor, to go through and analyze all of the impacts visually that the homes are going to have, where they are, how they're being buffered, how we're preserving the tree line, and then how we're reestablishing vegetation as well. So what we had done during the site walk was we had a balloon segment. So we actually took balloons and we put them, I'm going to show you, we put them at certain levels within the subdivision. And we did that so that the board members could get a real vision of what the height of these units would be. And Mr. Poor, I do have those site sections, and I'm going to go through those, and then I will email them in a separate, setting or separate email to Mr. Ruff to distribute so that you can really analyze them, but they are a part of this presentation. So we did locate balloons, and we located in very discrete areas to be able to show you what the elevation of the home would be. So for example, we set a balloon at unit 34. We set a balloon at unit 3. We set a balloon at unit 5. We set a balloon at unit 9. We set a balloon at 25, and we set a balloon at 28. The purpose of that was to show what the actual top of the building, the very peak not I mean the very peak of the building where it would be. And I think it was helpful for the board members to actually see that. So we did this, and I think that what was clear was there were some further questions, right? So people wanted to see what the cross sections were like even more. I think the consensus was areas here, here, I'm Xing them, here, and even here have absolutely no impact visually. You can't see them from anything. They're just, even though some of them are a part of a fill, so there's a higher level balloon, it's clear from the height of the canopy that they'll just never be seen. The visual impacts of those units are absolutely mitigated. And then with regard to these units up in the front, actually the impact for 3 is fairly well mitigated as well, because when you're looking at the entrance point, which is another one of the visual impact points, and we did do a cross section for it, you know, we've decided to infill some of the planting to make sure that there's a better visual buffer. But all of the this won't go down. So basically the area in this corner here, one sec, is this corner, and the corner, I apologize, that's off the screen, which I do have another picture of for you, will be heavily landscaped, and we will be using, you know, large caliper trees that will eventually be providing a very thick buffer visually along Cherboco, because the only point of impact and the only point of clearing at Cherboco is going to be in this area. The rest of Cherboco is going to remain in its natural vegetated forested state. So I'm going to take these off so that we can see them. Now I'm going to go to the next slide. Here we go. So we did cross sections, and in order to do a cross section, what you do is you show the canopy, the actual canopy of the trees, and you show a cross section visually. And I'm going to show it to you in a minute. In order to do that, though, we actually had to fly the entire property with a drone. So we did that, and the drone actually shoots the elevation and shoots the tree canopy. So what you see here and what you see noted here, I'm going to make it bigger because I'm having issues seeing. So if I am, I'm assuming everybody is. So basically, the overall height of the canopy, you can see this. So what we're showing is outside of the project. So this is going down Cherboco. The trees along Cherboco are about 60 feet. That's the canopy. The trees along where the farm is, so before you reach the development area, they're 40 to 50 feet tall. I think that was corroborated when we actually went out to the site and witnessed it and walked the property. The trees along Essex vary greatly. I mean, they've been taken down a lot, right? So there's been some revegetation, taking down, replanting. So those trees go literally 30 feet to 60 feet. So there's a variability along Essex Street. But the overall tree canopy for the project, we wanted to show it to you, is about 60 feet. You do have some 10-foot variability, but the overall canopy is probably about that on average, based on our drone flights. So I'm going to go back to Fit 2 so that we can continue. Now, this is the meat of it. I think that you're going to like these. So this is the Village Cherboco Hill cross sections. When we had our last meeting, Mr. Poor had been the party to actually ask, look, I really want to see a tree, I want to see a cross section, I want to understand what the visual impact is going to be, and the only way for me to do that is to see existing grade, proposed grade, home grade, canopy. So we did it. So the locations that Mr. Poor had asked for, and Mr. Poor, if you have any questions, please let me know, was as follows. So you can see right here is A. So I outlined it for you. Cross section A is, we were asked to provide a cross section from 288 Essex Street. We were also asked to provide a cross section from 16 Cherboco, which is B. We were also asked to provide a cross section at our entrance, because I think Mr. Poor recognized, look, you are going to take down trees there, so I want to see a cross section going back into the site. I want to see what that's going to look like. So that is what we have done. So I'm going to erase these. Now you know, oops, sorry. Now you know where we did the cross sections from. I'm going to go through the actual cross section analysis. Now I will say to you that it's going to be, because the property, and when you do a cross-section, you have to do it in segments, it is going to be maybe a little more difficult than I would have liked it to have been to see it, but I'm going to blow it up. But I'm just showing you, this is A. So this right here, before I blow it up, I just want to explain to you. Right here is Essex Street. So this vision line right here, and Brent Cole, who's on the line, is the engineer who actually prepared these cross sections, and he is going to probably give you a little bit more detail than I am during this particular part of the segment. But I just want to be able to show you an overview and then walk through it, because I think it's important to understand this. So again, this is from 288 Essex, and this is the cross section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop annotating. I'm going to erase this, and then I'm going to blow up the screen, because that's the only way really you can get a vision, and I can show you what the tree canopy is in terms of elevation, the home elevation, and then the proposed vegetation elevation. So let's X out of this so you don't have to look at it anymore. And let's zoom. I think if I went to, I'm trying to remember what I had gone to. I think if I went to 200, you could, I'm going to try 175 best. You'll see. So you'll see what the elevation is at each segment. And I'm going to, you can't see that yet. I've got to zoom. I have to zoom bigger. Excuse me. Let's see. You still can't. Okay. If I go to 400, it flips it into 3 pages, which is why I'm not going to. Okay, here we go. This is great. Okay, so please let me know if you can't see this, and if you cannot, I will try and go into greater detail. So here's the elevation of the street. Brent, please, I don't know, Mr. Mitchell, if Brent Cole is actually able to speak, but would it be possible to unmute him so that he can contribute at this portion? Because I'm not sure how that works.
We're attempting to do that right now.
Perfect. I can keep going because I do want to explain. So the elevation at Essex is 60. So as you come down, you can see the existing grade really remains pretty constant at this particular portion.
You can raise his hand.
As we migrate towards the back of the property,
Oh, okay.
we are going upward.
They
So
just need-
right here, we're still at 60, but you can see how the elevation is rising. So at this point, you can tell that when we hit a certain point right near where house 7 is, and I'll go back and show you that, you start to have an increased elevation grade, and that's probably at about 80 here. So now we're going to just keep going further. And this site, don't forget, this site absolutely has a grade change where we're going up. So from Essex Street, it's at a certain point, which makes sense. That's where the farmland is. And then it goes up to our property, and then it goes down again. So that it's like there's a hill on the property, and then it goes down. So you can see here, we have our first home. And the first home is set at about, it looks like 105, not quite 110 elevation. You can see that right here, can't you? So right there, that's about 110. All the tree canopy is completely blocking it. You can't see 110. You just can't see it. So that tree canopy most certainly obscures our vision in on this cross section A. Now we come forward. This home is a little bit higher. You can see it's probably, maybe it's 2 feet higher than house 7 is house 43. And in this point, you start to see another increase in the elevation. So when we come back more, now when you get to house 48, you can tell that the elevation at house 48 is just under 140 for the elevation. So basically, they're at 140. So now I'm gonna, and I apologize for doing this, but I have to show you. So what you have is you have some trees that are hitting 130. So that's basically what the tree canopy is here at 130 elevation. Doesn't mean that the trees aren't 60 feet tall. It just means that because they're lower, they're at a lower elevation in comparison to the home. Notwithstanding, this particular home at elevation, let's call it 135, almost 140, will not be seen from Essex. It's just, there's too much high tree canopy, and the visual, because Essex is set lower, that you won't be able to see that home. Even with a home set back, go back. even with a home set back on Essex Street, a two-story home, it just is set at 60. So even if you go up and you increase, if you have a 40-foot high home, you're still not going to be able to see all the way into the property and to see that home. And here we go. Here's Brent and Jeff. If you guys unmute yourselves, you can probably add some color to the extent I did not provide proper color. So I just wanted to make sure you saw that. Here's the, oh, I'm in the wrong cross section now. I just switched. Oh, goodness. Okay, so here's, how did I get to C? Brent, did I just make something happen that I should not have had to happen?
Yeah, I can share my screen if you want, Jill. Or...
Yeah, what I think I did is, my cross section A, here's 1 of 3. And I think that I have 2 of 3. And then I screwed up and put in, I don't know how I managed that one. I can change it and put in the 3rd one. But if you would like to share and to try and go through this a little more detail and in better fashion, I'd greatly appreciate it. Ready? Go ahead. There you go. Perfect. If you increase your zoom to about 300, then people can see.
So I'll do one at a time then. So good evening, folks. For the record, my name is Brent Cole with Granite Engineering. To my right is Jeff Merritt, my business partner. So I think Jill did a great job at showing you the first one. That was section A. But moving on to section B, this section was taken from Cherboco through the entire property. So we start here on Cherboco. Hopefully everyone can see my cursor. There are some trees along the roadway, very minimal. You likely can see through them. And then we enter the wetland area, or actually the farm area, sorry. This area starts the wetland, where you'll start to see that heavy growth that Jill showed in the aerial photographs. And then we start to climb, and that's where you'll see that buffer really is provided here, kind of shading everything from the development. So in this area starts house 4, as you can see, and then roadway A. Moving on to the next slide, we're just continuing on through the development here. Looking in through this area, this is the loop road, starting in on loop road A here. And then we have a climb up to the existing vegetation, and that's where there's another big area of existing vegetation, the large growth, the 60-foot trees, that continue to provide that buffer before you hit the end of the cul-de-sac area. So really the distance between Cherboco and this area, you really never see this back housing development where the 25, 24, 23, and 22 are. The last cross section we did was section C, and that was the one taken from the entrance and went through the entire property. So as you can see, if you were standing at the entrance looking basically up at the road, that's the cross section that we took, where you'll see the development of 35 and 34, and so on and so forth. There are trees along Cherboco being planted, and those are blue spruce. They will provide a very good buffer to Cherboco Road and the development, especially as they grow. Because of the relationship of the blue spruce to the roadway and the development, it'll basically look like a barrier to the development, so you really won't see much from Cherboco. The last slide here concludes the cross section. As we split the property, you have the intersection of the loop road. You continue through the roadway. You see houses 36, 37. It's pretty much at the same plane and grade through here as it flattens out. And we end with house 10, and then we fall back down where you'd have the wetland down in this area and your existing vegetation. So feel free to add any more. These could certainly be provided to the board if you guys didn't feel you were given a chance to review them or see them, or you want to cut them out and put the cross sections together. So if you guys want copies, we certainly provide those.
And they are part of the they are part of the PowerPoint. So if you can stop, well, you know what, Mr. Mitchell, if you have questions about the cross section, in particular, if Mr. Poor wants a follow up before I take back control, I offer it back to the board.
Jonathan?
I have no questions. I have no
And I will
specific
provide you a
questions at this time, other than a comment that it's very difficult to understand the cross sections looking at them in PowerPoint, and I would appreciate, seeing the copies. And I think that this site is a very complex and intricate site, and I would also like to see. You've said there's been revisions for the landscaping at the entrance to the Cherboco property. Right now, there's in the package that we received, there's very minimal information on that landscaping, and it's fairly low, and there's a stone wall there. If there's revisions to that design, I would be curious to see those revisions, because that would affect some of this information that you've submitted.
Most certainly. Yeah, I think we did do an updated submittal on the landscape plan, but I apologize, Mr. Poor, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I will make sure, because the PowerPoint was simply intended to be a distribution, so the public would have the same information, and then I will most certainly deliver to you the full drawings of the cross sections through Mr. Effort. Okay, do you want to give back the screen to me? I don't know if you have already.
I have, Jill. The screen's all yours.
You did? Okay. Oh, I'm cancel that. Believe it or not, I'm trying. Really? But you don't see my screen yet, do you?
Nope, we just see you. Uh-oh. There she goes.
Ooh, I don't know what just happened there. Okay. There we go. Okay, so here's my PowerPoint again. Let's, so I just did the other cross sections. I mean, honestly, it just was more of the cross section, which I will get the full report to you. So I'm going to go back up to what our original outline was. I don't know why I can't do it. Okay. There we go. So basically, just again as a summary, so what we wanted to accomplish this evening was to basically confirm the project eligibility and the compliance with sections 8.2 and section 9.1. We wanted to review also the inclusion aspects of it, but I recognize that we still need to go to the Affordable Housing Trust tomorrow evening. It appears that there really is some misunderstandings, and we just need to go over it and make sure everybody's on the same page. We wanted to be able to resolve the GPOD discussion because, I mean, it just seems that that is readily resolvable this evening. And then the site walk discussion follow-up. If there's more comments from the board, more information that they would like relative to that site walk, we would provide it. One of the things that did come up during that site walk, we got some very useful information from Mr. Poor relative to the trails and where they actually go. And Jeff and Brent, the engineers, are actually going to take that information and import it onto our plans so that we can show the public how we actually are saving the trails, and that those trails will now be open to the public and able to be used, which they aren't without permission from the Rich family. So we are going to save those trails, and we're going to show you what they are. But it is noteworthy to mention that there is one trail, as I had mentioned before, that will not be saved. It's the one that goes up into the very high parts of the development, and that's where the development area is. And they weren't well traveled, but the well traveled trails are preserved, and we are going to make a circuit. That was one of the other things that was commented on by the board, is that they thought it was very important that the trail system connects, that there be a circuit, that you can walk the entire trail system and go in and out at the same point. And we are going to provide that to you at the next hearing. Relative to the presentation of the cross sections, obviously that was intended to stimulate additional conversation, and that will be ongoing because that's all part of the special permit process for mitigation and offsetting any possible impacts that are really negative, reasonable. So I'm not saying that there are no impacts. There's always an impact because there's going to be development where there isn't one. But what is a reasonable impact and what can be expected when you have a piece of property that can and will be developed? And that basically sums up our presentation. I would welcome any comments, questions from the board as you see fit. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jill. Let me poll the members and see if there's any questions. Richard?
No, I don't have any questions at this point.
Jonathan?
I guess, a little bit confused and concerned about the GPOD interpretation. I've read Ms. Mann's memorandum in detail and appreciate that the memorandum really talks about the zoning provisions are intended to be read in harmony with one another rather than in pieces. Otherwise, that would be considered arbitrary and capricious. So I support that approach to that framework of interpreting the bylaws. I also appreciate the fact that this is a very complex site, and the site, the existing site being very steeply sloped and complex topography and abutting an aquifer and groundwater area. The puzzle that I have is that since the site really behaves as a whole system, basically you've got a very steeply sloped, not very well drained existing hilltop that then pretty much all dumps down into the aquifer area, and at various speeds and directions, and then that's all being changed around in terms of topography, and that right now behaves as a system. And what I find troubled by is to select, in a sense, kind of arbitrary divisions within that property, saying this is farmland, or this is open space, or this is the development portion of the property. Those lines are in a sense arbitrary in relationship to the way the system behaves in terms of drainage, topography, and so I'm just troubled by, I'm pleased that the bylaws are being looked at in totality as a harmonious whole, but I'm troubled that the lot is not being looked at as a totality and a harmonious whole, where it's one property, it's under one control, it's in one vision, it's one project, and to take pieces and select them such that the bylaws are basically divided up accordingly so that it negates some of the considerations of such an unusual site, I'm troubled and confused by. So that's a general comment about the GPOD. Notwithstanding, I was assuming that we were going to get a presentation by Dave Thompson, who was going to talk a little bit about the history of this the research that went into this bylaw. So I would look forward to when and if that is going to come about. And the other thing I would say is that given that the site is so complex from a three-dimensional and a drainage and topography point of view, from all aspects of evaluating it as a proposal, I think that this project really warrants a greater understanding or presentation by the applicant and an understanding for the board and the rest of the community of what the shape and the form of this thing is in terms of existing and proposed topography. And in the site walk, one of the engineers said that in the past they have done and have the capability of doing 3D modeling. And I would really like to promote that this thing be modeled in a fairly simplified form, so that the board and the applicant and all of the other folks looking at this have a full understanding of what the changes are and what the final form is. And so I'd actually like to make a motion here that we request that this be modeled in 3D, and we can discuss what that includes or doesn't include. But I would like to put that motion on the table.
As a proponent, when you say 3D modeling, can you just explain? I mean, there's
Absolutely.
different things that it means.
Absolutely. So, so what is complex here is the existing and proposed topography, and the CAD systems available right now. I don't know what the engineer is using, but in our projects, we are able to create a simple mesh that shows the existing topography, and then we superimpose a proposed mesh on top of that, and with a simple toggle you can see what's existing, what it looks like existing, what it looks like proposed in any view. So that's a very simple CAD program. Then you can add to that, you can add the roads, you can add the sidewalks. The buildings could even be blocked out as simple building blocks. They don't need to look like buildings, but they can just have the correct height. And then the complicated thing comes in landscape. Landscape takes a lot of memory in the computer, so you don't want to put a lot of landscape in it, but there might be a rudimentary way just to show where the undisturbed tree canopy is around the edge. But given that this site is full of 2-to-1 slopes, all of those lead to, the hardscapes lead to a stormwater drainage management system, but the pervious areas, lawns and whatnot, are not really necessarily completely covered by the stormwater management plan. And yet there are many, many 2-to-1 slopes that aim at buildings, aim at roads, aim at sidewalks, and aim at the wetlands, and aim at the GPOD. And I'd really like to have a better, clearer picture of how those pieces get put together and allow others to evaluate it. So that is what I mean by a 3D model. So it doesn't need to be an exhaustively detailed model, but it's a rudimentary model showing the existing and proposed topography. And the engineer had said that they have capability of doing that and have done it.
I don't know which, was it?
I'm not sure which engineer it was. It was the person who's involved in mapping and modeling the project. So that would, I would imagine, be someone from Granite Engineering.
Jeff, was that?
No, I don't think it was our office, but it may have been Greg that had mentioned that on the sidewalk, Jill.
Okay. Yeah, because I've never done 3D modeling before. Okay.
No.
I've been doing.
Tried the cross section, I believe, at your request. So you'll have those to take a look at and try to get an understanding of the existing grade versus the proposed grade. We do show both the existing and the proposed on the cross sections there. So maybe once we provide the paper copies of those, it may be a bit easier to kind of get a feel for the land.
The reason it came up for me was I was, just as a simple exercise, I was examining the grades and elevations and 2-to-1 slopes that are visible from Cherboco Road. And you've basically got some, right inside the entrance, you have places where there's over 50 feet of increased grade that are basically 2-to-1 slopes that, according to drawings, are just grass planted slopes, basically following DOT specifications for basically sort of the equivalent of highway embankments. And those would be useful to see in 3D, you know, so 50 feet of height within a fairly short distance at the entrance to Cherboco Road is going to be, if nothing else, visually interesting to see how that is managed.
So are you talking also, Mr. Poor, about the stormwater management component aspects?
Yes. Yes, I'm talking about a lot of different elements to this, basically as an entire system. So I'm just promoting that this thing be better understood in 3D. I think the site walk was interesting and informative, that the degree of changes in the topography is fairly significant, and that really will have a dramatic impact on the appearance of the property from various vantage points, the movement around the property, you know, the steepness of slopes on sidewalks, and how water moves through the property, and the visual impact from various vantage points, especially from Cherboco Road at the entrance. One last thing, and then I'll stop talking, is what I think is important for us to understand is there's, and you can correct me with the number, but there's just under 300 linear feet of disturbance, most of which is ledge removal and tree removal at the Cherboco Road entrance. And so when you combine almost 300 linear feet of disturbance combined with, when you're looking into that opening, that I don't know what the exact number is, but it's close to 300 feet. When you're looking into that at houses that sort of stack up in a row, surrounded by embankments that vary from 20 feet to 30 feet in individual increments on the left side of the property that are basically proposed as grass slopes or meadow slopes, that's a fairly significant visual impact, if nothing else, from Cherboco Road. And so, you know, so those things would just be helpful to see a little bit more descriptively. And I do appreciate your efforts at the site sections, but this site, I think, is complex enough that more information will be needed, even other than studying those cross sections that you've provided. And I do thank you for providing them.
And I don't necessarily think that there are certain parts of the project that we could 3D show. It's just that this entire site, to do that for a 16-acre parcel, you know, a substantial portion of which is shielded, is not going to be fruitful. Like the cross sections from Essex and Cherboco, you know, those A and B, are okay, but it's clear that you're not going to see anything. I mean, so I think that if we could limit that, it would be a lot more manageable, because providing these 3D modeling is a very, very difficult engineering task. I mean,
so here's an intermediate suggestion that might help folks understand better. I actually have in front of me a sketch that I did myself of instead of a site section, basically a site elevation, as if there weren't any stone wall or vegetation at the front, because the vegetation that I have in my package is relatively small. There's some river birches and some rhododendrons and a stone wall. So they're, compared to the scale of what I'm looking at in elevation view, they're fairly minor. So I think that that's going to be one of the key pieces to evaluate, is what this thing looks like from Cherboco Road at that 300-foot cut. And you had mentioned that you've been doing some revisions to the landscape proposal out front. That will have an effect on this, so you could certainly include that in this elevation view. But it's a very complex and layered elevation view. So you could start with that as a 2D exercise.
I understand that. Okay. Jeff, is that something that is manageable?
Excuse me,
Why don't you take that under
Oh, all right, I just, if you were
advisement?
gonna vote on it tonight, I was gonna,
Why don't you take that under advisement and figure out what, if anything, you can do to respond to that?
okay. Okay, I appreciate that very much, Mr. Mitchell, thank you.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
This sounds like way like overkill to me. Way like overkill.
Okay. Emil?
Emil Dahlquist. I concur with Jonathan on this, actually, because what was really revealing with the site walk, which was excellent, was the massive changes at the entrance, which I think from the public right-of-way probably is going to be the most visible part of the project. And as he said, it's going to impact a couple of hundred linear feet across that, which is a lot of ledge removal. So if there is to be a limitation on this, I would wonder whether it could be the entrance off Cherboco up to the top of the hill, because again, that is going to be the most visible. And when you actually look at it, and you look at the topography, you're going to have to plateau the series of houses all the way up to the high point on that road, and how that looks is going to be. I think a lot of the conversation at some point, once all the peer review information comes in, I think a lot of the conversation might turn to really what's going on the hillside. And again, as he said, this is really complex enough and a big enough project to warrant that. It's not that unusual, frankly, for large projects. Doesn't have to be in great detail. I think, as he said, it can be done in a manner that just representative of really the major rock removal and final topography there. It's interesting looking at, because at your road profile, you did show a dashed line showing the high point of the existing elevations and then what it's going to be once it's finished. It's an extraordinary amount of stone, and I think you at the site meeting indicated that you will provide that information, the actual cubic yardage at some point. And the other aspect is, with all this rock being removed, that you're going to set up a crushing plant on top of the hill to operate, to get all your substrate there is another issue that will come into play. Again, I think because of the nature of this project, the way you're choosing to kind of spread out across the 16 acres, the impact on a lot of area there, it really bears, I think, a due diligence. I think we ought to be able to look at that, and I think it's a reasonable request, frankly. But I'll leave that up to other board members to make their comments on it. Thank you.
Marty?
Well, I agree with both Jonathan and Emil. I think it would be very helpful, particularly to lay people. I mean, we have the benefit of some very experienced architects and whatnot, but to lay people to understand the topography as it is now, and then to see it as it will be built after the removal of all the ledge and whatnot. And I think Jonathan really hits on a point here with these slopes and how, you know, the runoff, and I know you do have a storm management system, but how the groundwater could be affected by these very steep slopes on this site. And I have to agree, after the site walk, it is a complex site. We were going up and down a considerable amount, and the topography really does change quite a bit. And of course, the entrance is going to be a very steep cut to access the back of the site where most of the units will be constructed. So I'm on board with them.
Do you think that, Jonathan, do you think that a 3D model is entirely necessary and explanatory as would be a...
Can you take off your mask so we can hear you?
As would be a rendering from Cherboco Road looking into the project, a 2D rendering that was at eye level from a walker on the street?
What I think the 3D model would help people understand, and I agree with Emil, it doesn't have to go all the way into the depths of the property, but up to the top of the hill would be extremely useful, because number one, it would show the basic massing of the site, because there's not just building massing, there's embankment massing, and there's no grass embankments anywhere on Cherboco Road. I would like to take a second and at some point and talk about what the nature of Cherboco Road is. I've done sort of my own study of what all the frontages are, and the general distance between trees and the amount of disturbance as a context, because eventually we have to evaluate this in context to the neighborhood.
Right, so that's actually where I'm working in 3D models 100% of my day, right? And knowing in the way you display that to another or to a group of people, either knowledgeable or not, it's oddly less telling than sometimes just a user perspective view from a very specific angle, trying to get at the heart of what the issue is.
Well, I think Emil touched on that, which is the basically the entrance into the top of the hill. I think that what you would see in a 3D model that's hard to get in an elevation view is the effect of these layers of grass embankments, the layers of buildings, and the layers of plateaus, and the 2-to-1 slopes separating the plateaus between the buildings. You'll be looking at that up the road, and depending upon what they do or don't do with landscaping, that's a lot of height to the first, even to the top of the second embankment is 50 feet up. So
Right.
that's some big nursery plantings. So again, in our own work, I've been working around ledge, and probably 80% of my work is working around ledge and clearing and blasting and working in very sensitive environmental areas. And on a regular basis, we don't do projects this big, but on a regular basis, we detail everything right down to the petunias that are going around the houses. I'm not asking for that. But I think that with pulling a mesh model and getting some basic massing in there, it would at least help people understand what's up and what's down. Because right now you're looking at a bunch of lines on a drawing, and it's really difficult for folks to understand that. I know this stuff pretty well. I can visualize 3D, and it took me quite a bit of effort to really understand the impact of looking up Cherboco Road. And again, I sketched it out myself. It's not ready for prime time here, but I did an analysis. I did a cross-section elevation standing at Cherboco Road, and I even drew in the heights that they proposed the plantings. So, and it was concerning.
Yeah. Well, whether it's 3D or 2D, I agree that there should be more representation of the finished result. I think that, CAD drawings are not very explanatory to anybody who's not going to then build them. So seeing a rendering, seeing a visual feedback of the finished form is important. So yeah, if that needs to be 3D to satisfy a greater number of members of the board, then yes. Otherwise, I'd accept 2D as well. Just more perspective information of the finished product.
The other thing I just want to remind you of is that part of this is understanding of not just groundwater, or not just stormwater management from impervious surfaces, but understanding where the stormwater is going that's not managed in the groundwater, in the stormwater management plan, which is...
Jonathan?
Yes.
Can we finish going around?
Absolutely, yes.
Last but not least?
Is it Patrick or Pat?
Patrick.
Patrick's talking?
Yeah, in my opinion, the approach that Emo had mentioned, particularly as the public viewability of the property is the most important, and that would be the location where I would think the value of having a 3D model depiction would be helpful.
You're referencing the entrance to the
Yes.
project?
Yes.
Okay.
Just briefly, I think I mentioned in the last discussion about a site logistics plan. I think Emil touched on it being a lot of material being moved around. Obviously, it's a big construction project. It'd be interesting to know how that site's going to be managed if and when during construction. Another element would be potentially if there was any sustainability goals for the project. I don't know if if the constructors or designers had anything in mind, both in the course of construction and then ultimately in the performance of the homes and whatnot. And lastly, I second the request for more information on landscaping and the landscape architecture.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Chair?
So I'd like to make a comment, if I might. So I think, Jill, the consensus is we'd like to see some detailed drawings, whether they're 3D or 2D, of the entrance off of Cherboco Road and how that looks visually as it climbs up the hill. On the GPOD, Jonathan, yes, it is a complex site, but all the sites are complex. Canterbrook was in the GPOD. It's right across the street from the river, Ipswich River. So these all get taken into consideration, and so was Patton Ridge. It's even closer to the river. So the question here is not whether these sites are complex or that the topography and is interrelated to the flow of groundwater. It's the applicability of the GPOD to this particular subject. And that's, we got to be careful of getting too, what's the word I want? Ethereal here. Is we have zoning bylaws we need to apply, and I want to make sure that we stick to the zoning bylaw. And when we're talking about the GPOD, does this project meet the intent and the requirements of that bylaw? So, and then we can get into the hydrology and how the storm runoff is managed, and is it managed appropriately, and where's that runoff going? So I want to make sure we stay focused on the technical details and not get off into some very large questions that we may not be able to answer and are not within our purview. That's my only comment. Jill, anything?
So with regard to the 3D modeling, I understand it. At first, I thought the whole site. Now that we've actually refined the discussion, Mr. Poor is contributed, Emil has contributed. With each of the board members, there was a layer of understanding, and to provide a perspective from Canterbrook is absolutely reasonable and will be delivered to you, I would hope, at the next hearing, but I have to secure that, so I can't promise the next hearing, but I most certainly will provide it as soon as possible. And relative to the GPOD, I would concur with your assessment. I mean, all sites are required to comply with stormwater. All sites are required to continue to provide for certain runoff to certain areas. You're required to infiltrate those provisions are not what your GPOD is this particular provision is something I'm saying we ought not apply. No matter what we apply and follow stormwater management. The point here is the farmland, I'm not creating the delineation. That farmland has been separated from this property for a long time. That is part of the land that had been farmed. It's clearly delineated. It's just been held together because they saw no point to separating it. And my point is simply that when you look at the intent of the bylaw, it's clear what it is and it's clear what it isn't, but whether it applies or not, there is no impact to the developability of the property. Canterbrook was developed and everything was in the GPOD. The stormwater management systems were, the septic system was, and each and every individual unit was. This particular project, there's one stormwater basin in the GPOD. The septic system is outside of the GPOD and every building is outside of the GPOD. I understand that there is, an element of that site that's high that would contribute to runoff, but that's handled in stormwater. That isn't anything we're not going to address, and we already have in the stormwater report that the peer reviewing engineer has gone through. We're required to maintain certain watersheds so that we do not affect, the supply for the aquifer. So those aren't really special permit considerations, they're more stormwater, and we most certainly have demonstrated compliance and will continue to do so and respond to all of the comments by the peer review engineer. And basically, I think that was, the responses to the 3D and then to the GPOD as well. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any further questions or comments?
I just want to say that I want to retract what I said. I tend to go along with the other comments that were made.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Jill, do you want to preview what you may be presenting at the next meeting?
If I may, thank you very much. Yes. So what the intent would be is to have our hearing tomorrow evening with the Affordable Housing Trust and then to report back. I might stand by my opinion. I believe that the correct amount pursuant to your bylaw is 1.4 million. Subject to that discussion with 1 and 2 family homes, I respect and appreciate the commentary. I will discuss it tomorrow night with the trust, but I do understand the merit of always providing for 2. I see that. So we will come back to you with the affordability. Hopefully, at that point, at our next hearing, we can resolve and get that done. With regard to the GPOD, if the board needs more time, it is essential that we resolve that issue, just to take things off the table. Although, there is no impact. We would like to confirm the eligibility aspects, whether that gets done tonight or gets done at the next hearing. It would be wonderful to be able to start to create kind of like the check the box kind of thing, where, okay, you've satisfied this element, let's proceed. And at the next hearing, as I said, we will provide you with that perspective, that front perspective. And I agree. I think it's very important to show people what's accurate. There's just so much misinformation, abusive information, and just not full disclosure. And we're trying to provide that to you. So we will give that to you, and we will show you what the impact's going to be. As I said, you're going to be able to see some of these homes from Cherboco. I mean, we're not trying to hide that. You will. But we're going to try and mitigate that impact and buffer as much as we possibly can. But the majority of the site is not visible from many, many other points in the town. So I think it would be nice at the next hearing to simply resolve the affordable issue, to put to bed the GPOT, so that we can complete our density, because that is an element, even though no matter what, it's going to be at 50. That would be nice. And then have that be our agenda for the next meeting. And then for the following meeting, we can review, the purposes and then all of the findings and how we support and not support that at the following meeting, if that meets with the board's approval. And I can provide Patrick with an outline too before the next meeting for you.
Hopefully by not the next meeting, but the following meeting, you can have responses to the peer reviews.
I apologize. Yes, the next meeting, you will have all our responses.
Okay, good. All right, very good. Any other questions? Patrick, do you have anything you want to say?
No, thank you.
Okay. So we will continue this meeting. I guess we need to take a vote to continue the meeting.
Yeah, we'd need to do that, but I do know that some of the public did want to speak.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're absolutely right, and thank you for pointing that out.
The attorney Deborah Eliason is sort of the spokesperson tonight, as I understand it. So if Pat can find her and allow her to speak.
Yeah. Oh no! I feel like a sci-fi film.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, Deborah Ellison, Ellison Law Office, 63 Middle Street, Gloucester. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Save Cherboco Trails and Watershed Group. There was a lot of information that was provided tonight, but there's a lot more information that this board needs. We did provide a letter to the planning board today that talks about some of the deliverables that were requested at earlier meetings, and I would request that at the next meeting that also be discussed. and that there be formal request from the board to the applicant to provide that information. I don't believe you can start making decisions on the bylaw and what applies and what doesn't apply unless you have all of the information in front of you. And frankly, you don't at this point. It was also interesting to hear about the site visit. The public was not allowed to attend the site visit, and it would be very helpful if the public could have a summary of what took place, what you saw. First, we hear about a balloon test at the site visit. There were clearly some questions that were asked and answered, and it would be very helpful for the public to have information with regard to that. I'd also like to address the Gpod issue. The petitioner's sole argument in her memorandum is that they can create a lot by just saying, this is a lot, this is the farm lot, this is the development lot. There are no defined borders or boundaries to those. What the bylaw is talking about, and it's the lot definition applies not only to senior housing, it applies to the entire zoning bylaw. So it applies when you talk about lot area, it applies when you talk about lot frontage and lot width. It's talking about a buildable lot, it's talking about a legal lot. It's not talking about something that you just arbitrarily decide. And so even on the plans, if you look at the applicant's plans, they don't even show these internal lines. If you look at the Exhibit A to the memorandum, which shows the open space, it includes the farmland. So it's not a defined, separate lot. It is an area that they just have called the farmland, and perhaps they've leased out. But it isn't a lot, and it shouldn't be considered a lot. So that to say that the Gpod doesn't apply just because you have 3 separate lots and the part of the lot that is going to be built upon is not within the GLPD and that it doesn't apply is inaccurate. And I think the board should consider that very closely and look at it very closely before just discounting the Gpod. The Gpod, I would say, was exactly meant for this circumstance. The purpose of having a 33% requirement was that if you have a lot, one single lot, whether it's large or small, that applies to, has a portion of it in the Gpod, the idea was that the Gpod would apply and that you couldn't just exclude your development and your 50-unit development by saying that nothing's within the Gpod, so you don't have to comply with it. That wasn't the purpose. I would also like to talk a little bit about the inclusionary zoning. I found it very interesting that the applicant's attorney stated that there are very limited off-site options for where to put affordable housing in Hamilton. And so therefore it was unfair to have the applicant do anything other than provide money. Well, if that's the case, it's going to be very difficult for the town to also find a spot for the affordable housing. So I don't think that's a very reasonable solution to the problem, is to say that it shouldn't be the applicant's problem, it should be the town's problem. Secondly, we also talked about this earlier, the $1.4 million, when you divide it by 6, works out to about $233,000 per unit. And so I think the board needs to think very closely about whether or not you could actually, as a town, develop these units for $233,000 each. I would suggest to you that that's probably not the case. Also, I would like to support wholeheartedly the 3D modeling. I think it's very important not only for the board, but also for the public to be able to see the modeling and what this is going to look like. I agree with Mr. Poor that this is a very unique site. It has a lot of variations in the site. There is a lot of soil disturbance that is being planned for this site, and it's something that the board as well as the public needs to understand. And the elevation off of Cherboco Road at the entrance is a very important view. That is going to be what the neighborhood is going to look at. That is going to change the view of this neighborhood. And that's something that I think everybody needs to understand and realize exactly what effect that's going to have. So I would suggest to you that the Gpod does in fact apply, and that the applicant should be required to provide information to make sure that they are in compliance with it. If they decide that they would like to lop off the farm lot, then they need to come back to you. They need to file an A&R plan, or they need to file a subdivision plan. And then they would need to refile this application with a new lot configuration. So it's not the mere fact of saying the farmland doesn't matter, it's separate, we keep it separate, it's leased separate. It's not separate, it's part of one lot. This is one lot, and everything that's done in the developable area of this lot is going to affect the rest of the lot. So thank you for your time.
Okay, anybody else that would like to, from the audience, would like to speak?
Christina?
I'm not seeing or hearing any hands raised or...
I just promoted Christina to panelist. Anyways.
Just raised my hand. Who raised their hand?
A lot of raised hands at the moment. Oh yeah, Christina's on.
Are we good?
There's two people I just promoted, Christina and Wendy Richardson.
Okay, we have Christina.
Hi there, I'm sorry, I'm pretty sick tonight, so hopefully you can hear me. Thank you very much, everyone, for your comments. My name is Christina Delisio. I am actually a resident of Manchester, and I appreciate all the talk, but I did want to bring up a fact that Manchester purchased this abutting land to protect our drinking water, and I'm just a little concerned that these thoughts, these preservation of our drinking water have not been discussed in fully. Maybe they'll come at a different meeting, but I heard at the last meeting that there was hydrogeologic testing that was going to be performed. But I mean, this all needs to be taken into consideration. Manchester relies on gravelly pond more and more every year, and with severe climate change, the septic system being so close to our drinking water supply, hopefully the planning board plans on taking all these into consideration. And I'm just looking for ways that Manchester can be more vocal in ways that we can protect our drinking water. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Is there somebody else?
Wendy Richardson.
Wendy Richardson.
She was the bottom one on your list there.
Ron and Katie. Mandy?
Good evening. This is not Wendy.
Okay, and we've got you. Go ahead.
Sorry. It's not Wendy, but it's her husband, Peter. And thank you for allowing me this time to talk about Cherboco Woods. But I live at 81 Berry Circle in South Hamilton, which is not too far from Cherboco Road. And I'm an avid dog walker and a biker, and I've ridden through those woods for at least probably 30, 40 years of my life. And I truly feel that this property is very steeply sloped. As one of the board members said, the system does not behave well, and given all the water that we've had this year, it certainly doesn't. And we have spent a lot of time tonight talking about the elevations from Cherboco Road into the project, but I would really like to see some design plans showing how the septic system works for that property, and how it would drain and where it's going to be located, how the septic system is going to flow throughout the property, and where it actually is going to be designed. And then that's sort of my first thought. And then my second thought is, if this project does happen, there are going to be a lot of folks that are going to be living there that are over 55 that like to exercise, they like to walk. And if anybody has walked up and down Cherboco Road in Route 22, it is extremely dangerous. And I would like to propose that this developer of this project add more sidewalks on 22 that would protect the people that are walking in and out of Cherboco Woods. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate this opportunity.
All right, thank you. Do we have anybody else that would like to?
Ron and Katie Vandy would like to say a few words, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members of the board, Chairs Mitchell and Reffitt, and members of the community. I'm Katie Vandy, speaking on behalf of my family, the Vandys, who own and operate Meadowbrook Farm in Hamilton. As a result of the recent site visit by the planning board, we trust that the individual members have been able to directly observe the close proximity between our farm's irrigation pond, which is essential for our continued farming operations, and the proposed leach field, which would leach continuous septic discharge from the 50 homes proposed for this development. It is very clearly visible to anyone just how close in proximity the proposed leach field is to this natural waterway. In fact, the waterway that our irrigation pond is a part of extends from areas in Wenham through Essex and eventually out to sea. So it is indeed rather extensive. Any potential contamination would not only impact our property, but then contaminate anything from our irrigation pond onward. This is the reason why our family has adhered to strict organic practices for decades. The proposed septic leach field is also uphill from our pond and property. We have reasonable concerns that once we begin pumping water from the pond to irrigate our fields, this will draw a fair amount of water from the leach field directly into that water source. If a septic leach field were to be built in its proposed location, we would be unable to continue using our pond from irrigation, as we do not wish to even risk pumping contaminated water onto our fields. Needless to say, that would severely impact any future potential for us to continue farming our own property, and would force us to restructure our business even further than we have already been forced to. In addition, our main agricultural product has always been organic vegetables, and we would be weary of continuing to grow vegetables with a leach field in such close proximity. We have always put out the best quality produce, and we would no longer be able to grow in good conscience without constantly being concerned about contamination. Regardless of safety measures taken to ensure the safety of the septic, the public's perception of our farm would be tarnished. Mr. Smith originally confronted us in April of this year regarding the easement agreement on our property. We were told that there would be no impact to our property and irrigation pond. We were promised little disturbance to our property, and that at most we would be inconvenienced for 2 days while the leach field was being built. That there would be, and I quote, one mini backhoe and one small truck, then only being disturbed once a year as vehicles would need to pass through the easement for maintenance. We did not have the plans that have only recently been submitted, which show the placement of the septic in more detail. We were concerned then, and we are even more concerned now. Now that you have walked the property for yourself, it should be clear that the obvious disturbance and potential disturbances to our property and business are far greater than a 2-day inconvenience of having a mini backhoe on our land. The potential for irreversible harm lasting decades is a more realistic estimation of risk and inconvenience. We have been an operating farm since 1974, and in total, my father, Ron, has been farming and working the land at Meadowbrook for over 60 years. Since reading our last statement, the support within the community has touched our hearts and kept us going. We thank you tremendously and want you to know that it's our hope for Meadowbrook to continue to be a part of the community for many years to come. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
John Cole?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I there?
Okay, John, you're on.
All right. Is there any chance I could share a screen?
What are you proposing to show us?
I just wanted to share with you some trail maps, just to clarify some of the stuff that Jill had mentioned about the trails.
He's all set. He can share.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Go ahead.
I'm trying. What's happening is that every time I move my mouse, it takes off on me, so I can't get to the, can't. Bear with me, I'm sorry. It's doing some very interesting things here.
Mr. Chair, if you can't do it, what if he sends a copy to his, to
I got
Patrick?
it. There we go. All right, can you
Okay,
see that
never mind.
screen? All right, so, sorry about that. The red lines on here are the existing trails. I apologize for this string. All right, so the red lines you see are the existing trails. You can see where, and I apologize, this is the older plan for the development, but it's basically the same footprint as you have. The only trails that remain intact is this trail through here, and all the other trails get blocked off. So I don't know, I'm not sure what Jill's talking about, but these trails are all getting destroyed along here through the development. And then you can also see the proximity of the trails to the housing projects. All right, this common trail, which goes from the Jersey barriers across, will now have a road that comes down here and across this that services the stormwater area here and comes over to the septic area here, where they're going to transport the many tons of sand and stuff to build that septic system that's specified in their current plan. This trail no longer serves as a trail; it serves as a maintenance road to the waste, to the stormwater, and to the septic. So it's hard to call that a trail. So any trail that remains kind of untouched is this trail here, which ends up being this beautiful trail that we've all know, walking 20, 30 feet away from the back of houses. So that's one illustration. Now let me see if I can get this other illustration. Can you see that now, the color one? Does that show up?
We're looking at the same illustration.
Okay, let me see if I can try to change that. Share screen.
John, I don't want to rush you, but we have other people that would like to speak.
I know. Here we go. So Jill had mentioned that the trails were not used. Just to give you an indication, so this is Cherboco Road. This is the common trails we use. These are the trails that go through the property and the construction. You can see that they're heavily used. As much as it might have been rugged for you guys, those are the trails that I used to walk and many people walk on a daily basis. So I just wanted to make sure that we had clarification that people understood that the trails are heavily used or were heavily used, and that all but one trail was being destroyed by this development. So I'm just asking that the developer and the developer's agents stop using this term about preserving the trails and how the trails are going to be all better for everybody. They're not. They're all being destroyed. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Who else do we have?
Al
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. Al, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Alta Group, 193 Cherboco. I'm not sure where this purview lies between the planning board, Concom, and exactly how this all works out. I do have great concern when I hear Jonathan Poor speak about the complexity of the land and the way that the slopes will have runoff happen. Any sort of storm management system in this particular location with the aquifer, with Beck's Pond, with Gravely Pond, with water supplies from Manchester and Essex, and we in Hamilton cannot be so arrogant to think we will not need that water with what's going on in the planet. That I'm not sure exactly who is the person, what committee has to look at this, but I think we got to look long and we've got to look very hard and not just accept, oh yeah, we have that figured out. It's all good. 10 years from now, developers gone, condo associations running this, our ponds are getting polluted and we have no water. I am very disturbed by this, and I want to make sure that we know as the public who looks at these issues. That's what I got to say.
Okay, well, a quick answer is that the stormwater runoff is under the purview of the planning board, and we're not just taking their word for it. We have a third-party independent engineering firm paid for by the applicant to look at all the details to determine whether, in fact, it's been designed and will operate as designed to contain that water runoff. We'll also be looking at other aspects of that. The septic system, we will get designs, we'll learn about how it will operate and where it's located, but that's the purview of the Board of Health to determine its actual design, and they will be the ones that permit it. So next question.
There's just no one has their hand raised, but there are Q&A. Go through, I don't know if you want to do that. Read that. Do you want me to read the questions?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Good man. First one. Do the cross sections show the amount of elevation change done with cut and fill, which includes an understanding of removal of the granite and existing vegetation?
Not as currently presented.
What is the impact on winter play in the view shed? I guess with deciduous trees and whatnot.
We won't know that. Can you comment on the fact that Cherboco is a scenic road and requires permission before any tree removal? What is that? Go ahead, Patrick.
And another move-in part of that is for us to have a concrete landscape plan.
Next one, where's the town stand with regard to the independent land yield analysis? As an abutter, I have concerns regarding the assumptions that the applicants have asserted when it comes to their analysis.
Are there other considerations? We've looked at the yield analysis, and we had some questions, and as far as I know, we haven't had further questions on that.
Are all the considerations, discussions, or until the town concurs with the number? Okay, well, that's just a follow on. Have there been any wildlife studies done in the area you're going to develop?
No, we look at, as far as I know, there have not. We look at such things as vernal pools, but we do not look at wildlife per se. And that's really not something that we've, I think that's within our purview under the bylaw.
I think the next couple of questions maybe were answered with the Vandy family.
Who was the farmer and, okay, yeah, where they did.
They went over that.
Yeah.
Will the public be invited to walk with questions along with the 3D? guess they're asking for another site.
Invited to a public.
Public are invited.
At this point, we don't anticipate doing another site walk. We did a site walk, and we're now asking for clarification in 2 or 3 DD drawings of the entrance on Cherboco Road.
When were the drone pictures taken?
I can't answer that question. That would be the applicants.
If Greenbelt were interested, what needs to be done with the town to make a deal? Who would they be negotiating with?
Can't help you with that. We're not parties to any of that. We can only deal with the application that's in front of us.
Why are they?
Mr. Chair, wasn't there a question, wasn't Greenbelt brought into this perhaps a year or so ago to try to negotiate with the Riches? Am I thinking of the right thing?
I have no knowledge about that. That may be the case, but that's not something we've seen any discussion of, or nothing's been presented to the board.
Right.
Relative.
That's correct.
Why are these properties only for 55 plus and not elderly housing? Can you ensure that 55 plus is Ms. Mann's presentation? She said that the housing was barred from 18 and under.
The way that the senior housing zoning is written, it requires the owner to be 55 and over. They certainly do allow for other individuals, but they don't allow other individuals younger than 18. As I understand it, this zoning was written to try to dissuade families with children who would be seeking enrollment in Hamilton's schools. So that's how that works.
I think I'm paraphrasing the next one, but they're basically asking, what does the stormwater prevention plan, does that deal with extreme storms, or is it just general runoff and whatnot?
That would be a question for the applicant. I'm not a civil engineer. I think they're built to a 100-year storm, but that's better answered by the applicant. We've already answered the Cherboco Road scenic question.
Mandy's want to speak, they spoke.
They've already spoken, right?
When will the Board of Health look at the septic system?
Go ahead, Patrick.
The Board of Health employ a site engineer reviewer. He has already reviewed the plans. He's made his review available. I'm happy to send that out. I'll also advise folks that he has requested that the town's peer reviewer also review that septic system design. So I'll make those available for folks as well.
Lastly, maybe I was mistaken. There's another farmer that maybe.
It was said that the Vandys were removed from the lease at the last meeting, and now they're talking about a new farmer farming this land, and so they're asking who the new farmer is, not the Vandys.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can't answer that question. That's a question that would have to be answered by the Rich family, since they still own the land.
That's the Q&A.
Okay, I think given that we've covered a lot of territory, and if nobody else has any comments, then we should entertain a motion to continue the meeting to September 27th. Is that correct, Patrick?
I thought that was the 21st.
Correct me. Is it the 21st?
Check account.
Tuesday, September 21st. Okay. So entertain a motion from one of the board members to continue the meeting on the senior housing special permit for Cherboco Capital Partners LLC until Tuesday, September 21st, 22nd. Is that right?
21st.
21st, okay. Sorry.
I'll move that.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? We'll do a roll call. Corey?
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
Marnie?
Marnie Crouch, aye.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Richard Boroff, aye.
And Rick Mitchell, aye. Okay, that is the end of discussion regarding Cherboco Woods.
Thank you for your time this evening. Have a good one.
All right, thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
And next on the upcoming schedule, I think we talked about that, unless you've got other things you want to add to that, Patrick.
Yeah, just a few added items. The DPW has a consultant that they've been working with for some time. They have made a number of proposed changes to our stormwater management regulations. The distinctions with regulations versus bylaws is that regulations can be promulgated and put into effect, amended, etc., exclusively with the board that employs them. So this would be a set of regulations that would be made to be compliant with current federal and state drainage requirements. Our set right now is a bit antiquated. I'm given to understand. I'll send the information out to members this week to make sure you have that. But in one of the next few meetings, and I'll pin that date down, they would like to come and present that to the board for your consideration and hopefully a vote. That he had mentioned the date of October 16th would be the next date that he thought that he could, but we'll need to confirm that with him. Another matter that it's not necessarily connected with the Cherboco Woods project. However, the town has been re-engineering Cherboco Road for quite some time. It's a roadway that has fairly de minimis width in certain areas. There's some drainage areas that are problematic. The town has been working with Woodard and Curran, an engineering group, for some time, who have taken this to the Conservation Commission a few months ago for review and approval. Cherboco Road is a scenic road, so that would come before the planning board. It would have an illustration that would allow us to understand where any stone walls were that needed to be modified. It would also denote areas where any trees over 6 inches that happen to be in the public right-of-way would be necessarily eliminated. They'd also illustrate the drainage inverts and those kinds of things. So this is about the town trying to make a roadway better. Parts of Cherboco Road happen to be unpaved. We would be paving our portion up to the Manchester line. I don't have a date for that particular project, but as soon as I do, I'll make the board aware of it so we can get plans before the board, set a hearing, review for that purpose, and go from there. One other item that I know the town's legislative body what's now called the Board of Selectmen, are working to change their term to be Select Board. That may be one word, it may be two words, I'm not sure. But they would like to change that nomenclature in all of the city recordings. And part of that, there, as I understand it, there are 18 locations in the Hamilton zoning bylaw where the Board of Selectmen are mentioned. And they are proposing an article for this fall's town meeting to change that term to what they desire it to now be. So that would require us to have a public hearing in probably early October, so the planning board can render its statutory public hearing as well as its vote, and then forward that on to the Board of Selectmen.
Oh, select.
Which would soon be
Select Board.
Select Board, but not until town meeting votes on it.
Yeah, there you go.
So I think I got that right.
Is that it?
That's it for me.
I'd like to have a discussion with the board regarding this hybrid model and whether we want to continue this hybrid model or whether we would like to go to all Zoom. Corey, you look like you've got something to say.
Yeah, the chat feature needs to be turned off. Like that's Facebook on a live meeting, and it's ridiculous. So whatever we choose.
We had that discussion previously because, and we saw very good evidence of that, is the group is having a discussion internally and completely is distracting for us, and it's not fair to the applicant to have the audience having this separate conversation going on. It's just,
Yeah, and it wouldn't be allowed if they were in the room.
no, we would not
write them
allow
down,
that. So that's
It does seem from a quick Google that it can be done through some sort of setting. I don't know, mid-meeting or if it has to be predetermined.
Yeah, I was Googling the same thing.
The fly out is crazy. Yeah, but that's my 2 cents on it. I'm down the street. It doesn't mean
yeah,
anything
no, I
down there.
heartily agree. Any comments, thoughts, ideas?
I think we need to do something. I think
Well,
I
that's
found it
good. That's
very
good.
distracting.
I would definitely vote to go all Zoom if we could eliminate, unless we can eliminate the 15 minutes to half an hour that we spend trying to resolve our technical difficulties. And I just simply don't recall when we were all Zoom having these issues. And you could consult with the webcam people, but you know, it's not fair to the public, and of course it makes our night much later when we just sit here for a half an hour.
That
And
part
since we
is,
have masks on anyway, and it's, you know, it's probably easier for the public to hear us when we're all Zoom than when we have masks on.
that part is dreadful. I totally agree. But the issue with Zoom is that you have a limited number of individuals who can be part of a meeting. You know, we had, at any one time tonight, we were bumping up not very far away from 100 people. So that's a limitation that we have with the regular Zoom meeting, whereas with the webinar, which is what we're in now, allows for up to 1,000 people. That was the motivation there, but I totally agree. Having these audio issues up front is certainly maddening.
Could we not use webinar and just submit us as panelists? If we were using webinar, submit us as panelists, we'd all be active and able to speak. The public would be held to their comment section. Chat feature gets turned off. I don't know if the room is the problem with the AV, but it seems like we could still use webinar.
If you, by Zoom, you mean all of us being in our own residences.
Right.
Like we were before, I don't want to go back to that. I hated it. There's something about sitting in a meeting with people and interacting as opposed to that. No, thank you.
Emil?
Yeah, I would agree with that. For a meeting like this tonight at the Essex Street, I think it's important for everybody to be here. You know, perhaps other meetings where it's not quite so maybe contentious issues, that's fine. If it's just a formality of getting a decision, I think we could do it by Zoom. But I do like the gathering here for the meetings. I like being not having the public here as well. So having the hybrid model works. And I think just hopefully just a matter of time before the mechanics work better. Because it is trying for everybody, not only us, but those trying to watch.
Jonathan?
I agree. It's essential to solve the technical issues because that was unacceptable, obviously, this evening. But I would also concur with Emil and Richard that being in person retains much more nuance in the conversation, the dynamics, and I think is a more productive discussion. And I feel that's a very strong, advocate for meeting in person.
Okay. I would concur. I'd prefer to be here in person, but it is unacceptable with the and I'm not blaming anybody. It's just it's a very clunky technology interfacing with the Zoom, and I presume we're actually on public access TV as well. So the question is, can we get any technical assistance? And this is not again aimed at anybody, but when Bill was here, Bill Melville. He was on top of this last time, and we did have some glitches, but it seemed to get resolved in like a 5-minute, and we seem to have this. So my question is, and this has got to be true for other public bodies, that asking us or you, Patrick, to be technically proficient in resolving these issues is unfair. So. Mm-hmm. How do we, any suggestions on how we resolve that?
I need to run that up the food chain.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is, it definitely needs to be solved. And I know other communities have solved it.
Yeah.
We haven't.
Yeah.
And it's maddening for all of us, and especially me. Thank goodness for Bill Melville, and especially for Pat Norton.
Pat, we have to thank you. Tip our hat.
Not part of the problem.
No, Pat, thank you for all your diligence in trying to resolve this. Yeah, and I'm happy to talk to Joe about this as well, because there's clearly, given all the vacancies in town meeting and the accrued non-paid salaries, I got to believe there's plenty of money to, if we need to, is have somebody dedicated to these public meetings. So, and if we're going to be in this mode, then we ought to do it right. So, I'll wait for your direction. Okay. Anything else? Minutes. Thank you. Okay, minutes for August 3rd, review and approve. Arnie, I'm going to defer to you.
Well, the minutes were 12 pages long.
Geez, I thought, at one point I thought we were going to summary of,
well,
we seem to go.
Marcy Ricker forwarded these to me basically with a big request for help because it was taxing on her. So I went through the minutes. I can say that if anyone has any changes or any belief that what they said was not represented properly, which may be the case. You know, I did take some notes, and my recollection is good, but it's not perfect by any means. So if anybody wanted any changes to the minutes with respect to their comments or questions, then they could just summarize what they would like included in the minutes, indicating a page number and paragraph, and that could easily be corrected unless the changes are more modest.
Do you have any changes you want to make?
Oh, I actually went through these.
No, I understood. So that was
No,
my.
I don't have any changes, but that's not to say that some could be made.
True. But the question is, does anybody else have any comments, questions, concerns, changes, modifications, edits, deletions, additions, subtractions, or other editorial comments they'd like to make?
I just have one minor question, and I don't know whether this is a typo or whether it was said this way, but on page 7.
You know, actually, I printed out the minutes, and
I have a printed copy here if anybody needs it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Page 7, Tom Hannigan, Ransom Consulting, talks about 3-to-1 slopes outside the buffer area, and I think a lot of those slopes are 2-to-1, and I think that was meant to be written as 2-to-1. And that's an important piece of data.
Yeah, yeah.
and that's something that would have gone by me.
Yeah, page 7.
That's page
Rock
7.
climbing
Last
versus-
paragraph.
Do you have that, Patrick?
I have that.
Okay. Anybody else?
No, insignificant.
Well, yeah, and I wonder if we could offer any advice to Marcy. 12 pages is a lot. At one point, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, I thought there was a advisory from Secretary of State that minutes do not have to be verbatim, that they are basically can be a general summary overview of the topic of discussion, and if there were any votes taken relative to that. Am I off base?
That's direct hit to that target.
Oh, wow.
That's exactly.
First time in a long time.
Minutes are to be topical, and then topical regarding discussion items, and then the votes, and how the votes are taken, the motions are to be recorded.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Right.
So my observation with these minutes is there was a lot of space taken up by just reporting what the applicant presented, and that's in the presentation material, and that doesn't need to be summarized in words, I don't think.
Right, so Marcy, if you're still listening, we want to lessen the burden for you and suggest that we make these, as Patrick said, topical. So just a quick introduction and quick summary of the topic being discussed, and if in fact there are any motions made or votes taken by the board, recording those. And then, as Jonathan said, they're in the record. Certainly in this case, it was in the applicant's submission. So hopefully that'll lessen your burden.
And I think with respect to that, I know that in other minutes, there was a list of the materials that were discussed at the meeting. So I think under those circumstances, if those materials are listed,
Yep.
the public will be able to, if they
Right.
are so inclined, to come to town hall and ask Patrick to actually get copies of what we discussed and have an opportunity to look at the different plans that have been proposed in
Right.
the memorandum that have been submitted that we are considering. So I think that's the way of getting around summarizing what was said in really gory detail sometimes.
What might be
And I think
challenging
you
for
agree with me on that.
What might be challenging for the minute taker is we're more familiar with what the materials are, and the minute taker might not be. So the question is there a way we could facilitate that a little more in a little more streamlined way?
Yeah, it's kind of a tough call, you know, it's.
No, Marcy's been doing this a long time, and,
Right.
and she's
Very capable.
and she's very capable. So I think the advice, and hopefully she's going to hear these in a recording or live or whatever, is that we'll keep it to a summary of the topic and topical, and if there are documents that are specifically referenced or submitted, that those can be annotated or noted.
Listed at the end.
I think they're supposed to be included with the minutes.
Right,
Or
or listed.
at least the record of the minutes.
Yeah, or listed in the minutes, but not to worry about a verbatim recording of the discussion and who said what, unless it's a specific, specific to an introduction of a different or important topic that is subject to a decision.
As we're recording these on Zoom, is that not like the ultimate meetings? Like,
Well, it's also recorded on Hamilton Wenham local, CAM, and there's a recorded record of that that the public can access by going to the website, or is it YouTube now? I think it's YouTube.
it's YouTube from my personal experience, and they're not always uploaded in a timely manner, but Zoom is being recorded and saved to a drive that is
Right.
link supplied. To
Right. So that may be where she's getting the minutes.
Just, if I may add one thing, Mr. Chairman, the only thing I've noticed in the past, if we're referring to a drawing, mentioning the date or revision date is really important, because what you can see on an audio is if you really do need to record what it is you're deciding on.
Exactly.
And I think if it's a motion to approve or not approve or whatever, to a specific drawing, that ought to be stipulated, not only the name of the drawing, but the date and the revision date. That's all.
That's sometimes tough because it might not be mentioned. I mean,
Yes.
we might all assume that.
I've noticed that in the past.
Without actually
Yeah.
referencing, and so I think that's the difficulty that.
Yeah, no, I think.
Well, a
Marcy might
footnote to that is that we're gonna have to get better at asking the applicants for that
Yes.
information, because if they're not sending it to me and I don't have it already, I just don't have a clue. For instance, that the PowerPoint we saw tonight, I haven't seen that before tonight.
And I have to say that that PowerPoint was almost invisible to me. I mean, I don't have the best
Right, so I think,
vision, so it was
so I think the other
very
thing
difficult for me to see.
to say, if we're in the hybrid mode, or even if not, is that we need to see, especially if we're gonna get those kind of documents, we need to see them beforehand so that we can actually read along with them or have
We
read.
have them in front of us
Right.
because I can't see them up there.
Right. All right. Anything else?
Just to pick up on your comment there, I've seen other boards that won't allow new information in without it being submitted to the board.
I
So
believe
that
City of
would be, I
Cambridge.
think that would be a good exercise to give it some rigor, because that I found very, very challenging this evening.
Yeah.
And actually, Jonathan, that's really an excellent point, because in some respects, we're sitting as a jury here. So, and maybe Rick is the judge, but we really do need to have evidence before us. And so that evidence, if it's in the form of a document, should be identified, and we should know.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, there you go.
Agreed.
Should be identified in the date and who prepared it.
Or if information is brought up that we haven't seen prior to the meeting, we don't vote on it.
Right.
Until the next meeting.
Yeah.
Nor do we even need to comment on it if we can't see it.
Yeah.
So,
So if you could pass on to Jill that in the future we expect hard copies to be available to us before she makes a presentation, and to anybody else that's making a presentation to the board.
Very good.
Okay. Unless anybody has anything else.
We haven't voted on the minutes.
You're right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would you like to be chair?
No.
Okay, so With the notation provided by Jonathan Poor, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of August 3rd, 2021?
I move to approve the meeting minutes of August 3rd, 2021, as amended by Jonathan Poor.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? I'm going to ask if this is, can we make this unanimous?
Sure.
Aye.
Aye.
Vote is unanimous of the planning board to so approve the minutes. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?